A few years ago, the Arctic Circle organized a forum in Greenland. I think it was the first forum we did post-COVID. And there was a young member of parliament from Iceland, whom I didn't know very much at that time, but who had chosen to be a part of the West Nordic parliamentary delegation, which, for those of you who don't know, is a cooperation framework between the parliaments of Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. And if I remember correctly, Kristrún, you stood up in Nuuk and asked a very pointed question of the Prime Minister of Greenland at that time. So, now you're the Prime Minister of Iceland.
You're repeating the question to me. What was the question?
Yes, well, I don't remember exactly, but
anyhow, but
I was sitting there watching you and realizing, yes, these were pointed questions.
Okay.
So to some extent, you have defined the terms of the dialogue here today. So let me start by asking you now, when you've been Prime Minister for somewhat over 9 months or so, 10 months. How do you see the Arctic challenges, the Arctic tasks, this whole part of the world which now is under the microcosm of global attention and so on, from where you are sitting now?
It obviously carries a lot more responsibility to say something about the Arctic than maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I will say, I haven't been in politics for a very long time. I came into Parliament in 2021. And when we ran for the last elections, the international debate or whatever was going on in the world wasn't really a big focus. I mean, foreign policy doesn't tend to be a big focus in general in elections, but this has been a lot more eventful than I ever could have imagined. And I think it's had much more impact on the Arctic than I would have thought. I know there's a lot of focus now on Europe, Ukraine, Russia, transatlantic relationship, and that is a focus for a reason, and we understand that, and we go to Europe and we have these conversations, but it raises the question of what's happening in between. And I think there is, for a lot of reasons, there are insecurities building up. It's hard for people to say. Somewhere I read that we're sort of living in a gray zone. People don't know what's happening to multilateralism, what's happening in international affairs, and are hopeful that we might be seeing positive changes, but sometimes you see a rift that leads to something positive, but are also worried that it might have negative connotations to it. And so it just makes me feel more responsible for us controlling what happens here. Because I think that's the biggest sort of message or lesson I've learned over the past 9 months, that there's so much going on both sides of us, that we better control what's happening in our own region, in our own backyard. And I think there has been, for a lot of reasons, this theory around the Arctic and this area, our backyard, that it's somewhat for others or outsiders to decide. The history has somewhat been that. We've had countries that haven't been, physically living in the region, controlling the region. And so we have to be more hands-on. That's why our government, my government, is looking actively at security, investment opportunities, how we can strategically place ourselves and strengthen the hub that Iceland has always been. We can't just sit back and say, we want this to be a risk-free, neutral zone, and whatever happens, happens. So it's pushed us to be more responsible.
Maybe we can get the lights up in the hall so I will see more clearly where people put up their hands. But at the forum in India, maybe because we were in the country of the elephants, there were some people who talked about the new elephant in the Arctic room, meaning the President of the United States who had just taken office. So I noticed in your description, you didn't mention the United States. So do you see this as a problem, or do you see this as an opportunity? I mean, how do you think we should deal with this new, which definitely is a new way that the United States is coming into the Arctic? I know there are a lot of people in the hall thinking about that. Some of them are too polite to ask the question. So.
It's okay. Listen, I think we've always had relationships with countries where we haven't agreed on every single thing in their foreign policy. Doesn't mean you stop interacting with them. Iceland has always had a great relationship with the US. We'll continue to have a good relationship and great relationship with the US. Our security is based on a bilateral defense agreement with the US. And I see a lot of opportunities deepening that relationship. But that doesn't mean you can't criticize certain things. Iceland also has a very deep relationship with Greenland, very personal relationship with Greenland. Even though we're different in some ways, we share a lot of things, geography, we share history, we share not having been in full control of everything that's happened in the country, and we understand fully what kind of feeling that could entail when you hear, people from powerful countries making statements like the President of the US did. And I've said this, the future of Greenland is in the hands of Greenlanders. But I also know this because I've talked with Greenlanders, both everyday folk and also representatives at high levels, that this region is still open to communication and business and investment from the US. They just want to do it in their own terms. And that's why I was saying we need to build further alliances, strengthen this West Nordic cooperation, strengthen the cooperation between Iceland, Greenland, Faroes, Canada, US, Norway, Denmark, this whole region. I could mention more countries, but my point is we need to be active because I think, maybe I shouldn't say this because I'm Prime Minister. I'm sounding like a political correspondent. But there's a grain of truth to a lot of things that happens. And I think, what was coming from the US is maybe, filtering in these ideas that we need to be more active in that area. And if we don't do it ourselves, someone else does it. So we just need to strengthen those relationships. And we have a lot of opportunities to do that, whether it's, like I said, security, infrastructure, obviously research, climate. This is what we've been strong at, but we need to be more active in other ways.
Great. So as I said, I need more light in the hall. So can I see some hands up? Please put on, yes.
You've asked all the questions.
Come on, you can't have well over 1,000 people in the hall without asking, yes. So can you bring the microphone there? Yes. And introduce your name and your country.
Hello, my name is Trine Jonassen. I'm editor-in-chief of High North News, based in northern Norway. We here talk about the wish for a military, Iceland's own military. Is there any truth to that? Thank you.
There's a lot of talk, and I've heard this talk, but it's not based on government focus or government planning. And to be honest, I can't speak for the entire Icelandic nation, but I think everyone is very happy with the current state of affairs when it comes to our presence and security. And the government is as well. When we say we need to step up in security, it means stepping up in what our strengths are. Personally, I think we could do much more with funding, whether it is through our NATO funding or other infrastructure funding or whatnot, by strengthening our position as a strategic hub, as a host nation, rather than building a whole economy in a country of 400,000 people around a military. And I feel like when I have those conversations also with other states, they're aware of that. So when we talk about strengthening security here, even strengthening defense, it doesn't mean bringing in a military. I don't think. It won't all be in my hands, because hopefully I won't be in this position for all my life. But I don't think we'll see a military here, Icelandic military, in my lifetime. We'll see.
Take one final question there, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Prime Minister, for sharing your thoughts about Greenland and the US. My name is Martin Breum. I'm a journalist from Denmark, and obviously concerned with that particular issue. So in extension of what you just said, to what extent would you say that the suggestions of the American president that he would like to have and take over ownership and control over Greenland is now a matter that should perhaps be an issue for NATO?
Wow. I don't think we're at that stage. I do, however, think it's important that international leaders speak up when these sorts of suggestions or comments are made. And I just want to make the point of saying how well I think the Prime Minister of Denmark, Mette Frederiksen, did on this topic. She went around and basically got leaders around the world to publicly comment on this focus. But I think we should focus more at this point in what the underlying message is that we're getting a message that we need to be more focused and active in this region, and we need to be building alliances with like-minded countries. Because, like I mentioned here before, I do think that we may have been a bit naive about this region for some years. We wanted, very naturally for it to be a low-tension zone. We also wanted Europe to be a low-tension zone. And we see what's been happening in Ukraine, for example. So there are powers out there who are looking at the world a different way than we are. And now, I'm specifically talking about Russia, but Russia is interested in the Arctic as well. So I see this as a push for us to step up in building alliances, infrastructure, strategic security matters. I don't see it at a NATO stage, but I don't know if you've had leaders comment otherwise. I haven't heard so.
I will take one question more from there in the middle of the hall. Please keep your hand up when you want to ask a question, because the people with the microphones need time to see where you are. Yes.
Hi, Leif Lutzman. I'm another Danish journalist. Mrs. Prime Minister, thanks a lot.
Skal vi tage det på dansk, eller?
Ja, det gør vi gerne.
Ja, måske. Nej. No, sorry.
That for the other ones. Thank you very much for your considerations. Pointing at the gray zone, you say we are in the region is in a gray zone for multilateralism. My question is, could Iceland or Arctic Circle possibly play a role in getting out of this gray zone? For instance, by inviting or securing the participation from all 8 Arctic nations to the next Arctic Circle?
I feel like this is a question for you. I mean, it's really lifting you up right here. No, yeah.
Well, of course, Iceland is in many ways well suited to be a safe haven, a safe place, a location for this kind of dialogue. And I think if we had launched the Arctic Circle in a large country, we would not have this kind of participation because we are a small country. But we also enjoyed the Arctic Circle, good cooperation with every government that has been in Iceland since then. So it's also up to the government, to some extent, how much Iceland is offering itself as a kind of a safe haven for all kinds of conversations that actually needs to take place.
I mean, I understand the question, and I think I agree with President Grimson that dialogue is important, and you need to keep the communication lines open, but principles are also important, and you need to draw the line somewhere. And I think, I think the position, for example, that Russia has been put in when it comes to Arctic matters, I mean, obviously it's uncomfortable in the sense that they're a big player in the Arctic. But we need to send a clear message that what's happening when it comes to international borders, international law, developments in Ukraine and in Europe are not okay, and there are, there are lessons to be learned from that. So, I mean, in a perfect world, yes, we will bring everyone to the table. We do not live in a perfect world right now. We need to get some engagement going on. We need to see what the developments will be on Ukraine, I think, before we would bring them to the table. It's not mine to say exactly what President Grímsson does in other countries, or let alone who he calls. But on a general note, I think Iceland has a very big part to play in, for example, the transatlantic relationship or across. And yes, we might be living in a gray zone of sorts, but I also want to say, and I don't want it to sound like, I'm not willing to draw the line anywhere either, that there tends to be, again, a grain of truth to everything. And a lot of the criticism that's been coming up from multilateralism or around multilateralism, for example, is because people don't feel engaged, they don't feel involved, they don't feel a part of what's been going on in the international order, and that we all need to listen to. So maybe there is a case for having different kinds of communication, and Iceland could definitely be a hub for that.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I think it's been an excellent innovation to come here and sit down and take questions rather than to make a speech. But if you're still Prime Minister next year, you are invited to come again.
Well,
but thank you very much. And now I invite Her Imperial Highness Princess Takamata to the stage.